How narcissists know you figured them out. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, where we dive into the many complexities of narcissistic relationships. Now, some of you may be thinking, I've seen so many of your videos, I totally get it now. Well, here's the reality. Once the narcissist realizes you're aware of their behavior, things get a lot more complicated for you. Let's break down exactly what that means. A question I often get asked is, do narcissists know they're narcissistic or difficult? And even more commonly, are narcissists aware of their insecurity? Because it's pretty obvious they're insecure, right? The answer is somewhat complicated. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Remember the shame-rage cycle I talk about so often? Narcissists aren't crazy or delusional. They can see the consequences of their actions. They know their behavior doesn't always come across well, but their impulsivity and sense of entitlement stop them from controlling it. It's like they have to release that tension or they'll burst. They know their actions may cause problems in the long run, but they'll justify, rationalize, or defend their behavior. In some small part of their mind, they understand it's not ideal, and sometimes in therapy, they may even admit they can't stop themselves. It's just too uncomfortable. But they'd never say it like this. Why can't everyone just let me say whatever I want? I don't mean it, but I need to let it out. Everyone's against me when they don't let me. Life is so unfair to me, and I know what's best. Why can't everything just go my way? They know they can't say that, but that's essentially what's going on. Now, there's a turning point in every narcissistic relationship. The moment when they realize you know the game they're playing. It's subtle and happens just below the surface. You stop taking the bait, the gaslighting doesn't affect you as much, and you start to grey rock more, remaining neutral and detached. You stop explaining, stop defending yourself. You might even stand a little taller, no longer getting as anxious when they threaten to leave or use their passive-aggressive tactics. At this stage, things often get worse. The narcissist will act out even more because they feel exposed, as if you've seen through their insecurities. They don't like it when their game stops working. As you grey rock, you'll notice their rage escalating. They need you to take the bait and act out emotionally. When you stop engaging, it triggers their need for control and validation, making them more desperate and volatile. At this point, they can start saying, "Oh, someone's getting upset," which makes them feel better about themselves. They ramp up their cruelty, and it gets worse, like climbing up the roller coaster. They'll start belittling your friends or family, pointing out things about you that are sensitive, and may even mock your job or your cooking. It gets more toxic than you ever thought possible. But if you manage to stay firm and not crack, hold your ground through this emotional roller coaster, the narcissist will eventually lose some of their steam. In some cases, they may even get bored, but they will deflate. However, reaching the peak of this roller coaster involves enduring a lot of abuse, anger, and rage. If you thought it was bad before, this part of the ride is even worse. As soon as you start to catch on to their game, somehow they pick up on it. Despite their lack of empathy, narcissists are highly aware of their surroundings, though it's all filtered through an egocentric lens. They're constantly scanning for threats, always on the lookout for someone who's not giving them the respect they believe they deserve. They feel that they're never validated enough for their greatness. They notice the shifts in how people react to them and become aware when others are onto them. Every narcissist reaches a point where they realize they've pushed someone too far, that they've broken them, and that the person they've been abusing finally shuts down. This can be especially significant in settings like work, where the narcissist may feel the impact more sharply. They often take family and close partners for granted, so they may not immediately recognize it in those relationships. But when it happens in a public or professional space, it really triggers their shame. When they realize that people in their world are starting to perceive them as unhinged, it shakes them. They don't like feeling handled or seen for who they really are, because it activates their deep sense of shame. Now they're caught in a paradox. On some level, they know they're unhinged, but they can't stop themselves. If you're in a relationship with them, this may gradually lead you to a place of indifference once you understand the narcissistic pattern. That pattern is exactly why I created this channel, to help you recognize these subtle behaviors and understand the playbook. Once you recognize the patterns, you'll start to create a larger distance between yourself and them, both physically and emotionally. They'll sense that you're no longer engaged in their manipulations. And depending on the situation, they'll respond in various ways, from rage to pretending they're in control, from trying to convince you they're a nice person, to resorting to insults or passive-aggressive behavior. The narcissistic relationship is all about control, controlling the narrative, controlling the image of the relationship, controlling the people within it, and, of course, controlling the narcissistic supply. It all comes down to one word: control. Once you realize what's going on, the narcissist will double down on their attempts to control you, and they'll try even harder to keep you under their influence. They're determined to maintain the narrative, but once you understand their tactics, their attempts to destabilize you will fail, and they'll escalate with even more rage. You might be wondering, is there a way to figure this out without triggering their anger every time? Unfortunately, probably not. The relationship will either reach a point where you become disengaged and leave, or, if leaving isn't an option, you'll likely make the relationship feel mechanical and detached, or you might just hope they'll leave, or have somewhere else to go when their tantrums flare up, because you won't tolerate them anymore. Eventually, your very presence will activate their shame so intensely that they'll either try to break you with their rage, or, in some cases, they might flee because your presence is just too much for them to handle. Either scenario is uncomfortable, especially if you're unsure whether you want the relationship to end. I get it. You might not want it to end, and it can be confusing. But here's the reality. Once you understand narcissism, it's nearly impossible to hide it from them. They'll notice your behavioral changes, and it's frustrating because you tried for so long to get their attention. But now that you've shifted how you interact with them, they'll see it immediately. Your new understanding will be noticed, and they'll likely pathologize it. They'll accuse you of being cold, distant, or socially awkward, all because they're threatened by the fact that you figured them out. It's a bit of a catch-22. What could ultimately free you, the understanding of narcissism, will initially make things harder. In the long run, it's a positive change, but in the short term, it can be rough. So, brace yourself for some discomfort as you go through this phase. At first, understanding narcissism might feel like you've cracked the code, like you've figured out the secret, but as your behavior changes, the narcissist will definitely notice. Whether it's a family member, partner, or colleague, they'll recognize the shift. The power they once had over you, the power that stemmed from your confusion and lack of awareness, is now gone, and they won't like that. This loss of control leads to frustration, which will likely manifest as rage that you'll have to endure. But, as I said, in the long term, it's healthier for you to understand narcissism because it frees you from personalizing their behavior and stops you from blaming yourself. It's not your fault. When you finally get it, you unlock the code to the manipulative dynamic that kept you under their thumb, and while the relationship may feel unfulfilling or unsatisfying at this point, at least you're no longer in a place where you feel constantly invalidated, confused, and uncertain. You found clarity, and that's a big step forward. I hope this provides some clarity. Thanks for watching.